employed people. And the reason is they're held in this condition by this so-called International Monetary Fund. But the reason each of these countries are in this condition then is that their governments are serving the International Monetary Fund at the expense of the people, and in particular by denying them the right to issue their promissory obligations free of extrinsic manipulation, and in particular free of terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest then. So these problems in South America, and I got a call from New Zealand, Venezuela the other day, and this fellow said, he said, famous across South America now, and I said, excuse me, and I thought back, well, it's funny, I used to hear from a lot of people down there, but I don't, and in the later 90s, I wrote extensively about how to save these countries from, the fate that they were suffering at the hand of the International Monetary Fund. And my efforts went largely ignored by, even people of Argentina, for instance, who, were suffering amongst the worst at the time, and are doing a little better now, but only because restructuring of debts keeps the host alive, that the parasite can siphon all it can from the host. So I received this call, and I was pointed to a number of links, and mathematically perfected economy translated into Spanish is in front page news and major news sites in South America. It was completely news to me, completely to my surprise. And yet, the body of work which is translated is not really sufficient to help the people down there. And I'm thinking at the same time, well, my God, personally, I rate it as a failure. As I rate my failure to acquire at least a respectful audience from Ron Paul, a failure as well, a failure for which we all pay. So I don't want people to misunderstand that my purpose is denunciation of Ron Paul. If right now Ron Paul called, of course, I would warmly engage him. I would politely engage him. And yet I would be compelled to raise these questions and their answers, which were worked out so long ago, which are simple second-grade arithmetic, that indeed Ron Paul's supporters would be gratified that Ron Paul had engaged in a dialogue over mathematically perfected economy. I would have some reservations about our working arrangements, the most important of which would be that there would be no compromising of what we would have to agree is absolute solution. A couple of weeks ago, I met a new Native American friend who was a fascinating person to meet, and he's a chief and a leader of societies which are highly respected in Native American I can't say government anymore because of course Native Americans have been denied to a large extent their true ability to govern themselves as they may wish. But our meeting was just so fantastic because I got advanced lessons on Native American government, which actually were, the background began with our discussions of mathematically perfected economy, which of course is a regular, practically incessant topic for me. And um, so Emmett Jordan and I, inevitably branched off into many different areas and of discussing history. And yet, I think that the things that were most important and fulfilling to discuss with him, because I happen to have my own ideas, which I think are, just happen as a consequence of my own life to coincide with things that Jefferson wrote about, and a furtherance of answers on these issues about what are the rights of people and respect to others, and particularly in respect to a majority possibly imposing injustices on a minority, which is wrong, of course, even if this occurs against even so little as we might say as an individual. When I raise this issue, I regularly get regularly get a very fulfilling explanation from my ever-growing number of Native American friends, and Emmett's explanation was particularly detailed and fascinating. But just in regard to these issues of economics here, for instance, the way this would have been handled, as Emmett explained at least, and is as best as I understand, which I believe is probably correct, but I want to apologize for any accuracy, because in truth this is a topic which should be discussed with the greatest respect for accuracy, because accuracy is so meaningful. But Emmett explained to me how a tribal council, which is to deliberate on any important decision at all, cannot leave the deliberation until they come to absolute agreement upon it. Now, this is a very compelling standard to contemplate, because if we as people were compelled to exhaustively debate any issue, such as purported economics, for instance, and amidst us was someone with irrefutable arguments, which could be known to be irrefutable by so little as elementary mathematics, accounting for every consideration conclusively, of course, intelligent people could only come to one conclusion and agreement upon such an issue. Many people say, on the other hand, today, not abiding themselves or even giving serious consideration to the prospects of such a standard, which I believe is indispensable. I could even, I suppose, say I know is indispensable, because anytime we fall from it, well, the situation is this. Any number of people can agree, even to the finest detail of what is wrong. But where any intelligent people are present and part of a process which must come to absolute agreement, not only are they so compelled then to come to the one and one only reasonable agreement, but the process of developing that agreement is such, the inevitable process of developing that agreement is such, that practically inevitably, they will even express it in its most elegant form. And this is something that I observe about all the great chiefs, and particularly the holy leaders, such as Chief Joseph, that their words were wiser than the words we hear today. You wouldn't have heard in the teepee where the council met some man decrying the whites and or the Europeans or whatever, that it was this or that or something else about them that was unresolvable, which would be resolved somehow by magic. Of course, these things happen. But the structure of such a government is such that given just one capable ruler or leader, that their influence is such that when they realize the answer, and honest people will simply merely hear it, it is the agreement that the group will most likely agree upon. And of course, should we agree upon the wrong thing, the thing which will not serve us, the thing which will allow us to suffer our own destruction at our own hand as a consequence of our own ineptitude even, of course, we always want to have on hand the reasons and means to rectify any impropriety in purported government. So these are issues that we absolutely have to resolve, and they are standards that we must at least test imposing not only upon purported representative government, which of course we know we don't have, but we have to impose that same standard upon ourselves. We can't be just saying, calling each other names, saying, an advocate of the only means of true free enterprise is a socialist or a Marxist or a communist. And I'm sorry, but these things happen in Ron Paul forums, and I think it's an amazing characteristic. And frankly, you can visit these forums and see these things for your very self at this very moment. So, no doubt, these things, this behavior, this lack of standard, does not resolve our issues. And so, this step is not a great step. It's a small step to take. It's the first one that can pave the way to resolution of our issues. If we are all to agree that a gold standard can save us, we have to see how. This isn't a matter of a mere blind guess or a whim or something that we've never worked out the entire pattern of it, tracing it from its beginning. Okay, what is take for example, what is the object of an economy? Why does gold fit in the scheme of that as the vehicle for trade? How is it that gold is an immutable token of value when there's a fixed number of units of gold, and the thing that they tokenize doesn't come in equivalent units? You see, these things are obvious, blatant disparities that we have to resolve if we're even to think right out the gate that our first thought is justifiable. We can't come up with one. Just because gold is immutable itself, does that mean it's an immutable token of value when whatever it's to represent isn't consistent with the gold? This is the very breach of principle that Ron Paul cries out against when he claims that there's circulatory inflation. the proportion of money in circulation isn't the same as goods and services, he's saying.